In this tutorial, I'll show you how you can make this lunar landscape and add cool elements like hills to give it some more texture, and change up the color to make it look like Mars, and changing it even further to make it look completely different like the bottom of the ocean floor, all in Photoshop. Hello, creative! It's your graphics girl of graphicsgirl.com. That's graphics with PH and S, girl with no I and 3 R's. And I'm here with a quick tip to help you design your brand. Head over to graphicsgirl.com and get your free Photoshop cheat sheet. It'll show you all the shortcuts in the program, whether you're on a PC or Mac. Just click the link below. The first step is to give yourself a canvas or to create a new document. So to do that, you come to File, New, or Command or Control N. At the top of the New Document dialog box, you can choose Web, and this gives you a whole bunch of presets for web application. If you come to the first preset called Web Most Common, it'll give you a dimension of 1366 pixels wide by 768 pixels high at screen resolution, which is 72 ppi. It'll show you that in its setup over here that it's landscape and RGB color mode. For our purposes, go ahead and turn off the artboards by unchecking this checkbox here. Then just hit Create. So to check the dimensions of any Photoshop file, you come to Image, Image Size. And you can see right here, it's defaulting to inches right now, which is what I have my file set up as. So if you change this to pixels, you can see that it is in fact 1366 by 768. That's just a little tip if you ever want to get the overall dimensions of any Photoshop document that you're working with. Okay, are you ready? Yeah. Let's do this. Our first step will be to create the top part of our lunar landscape. I'm going to zoom in with Command or Control plus to make this larger, but not so large that I can't see the outer bounding box. So you want to see a little bit of the surrounding pasteboard, as well as your live space. We'll take our rectangular marquee tool to make a selection, about half of this file. It's okay if it's not precise, and let go. So you can see now the marching ants that indicate your selection. From Edit, Fill, we're going to fill this selection with black. Next, we're going to deselect with Command or Control D. We're going to make a new selection once again with our rectangular marquee tool, and that selection is going to be a small vertical selection at the bottom. You can see once again that you have the marquee or marching ants as I call them. We're going to add some noise to this selection. We do that by coming to Filter, Noise, Add Noise. We're going to take that amount all the way to the end, 400%, and we're going to change the distribution to Gaussian. This is what it should look like. Next, we're going to blur this by coming to Filter, Blur, Blur More. Photoshop always remembers the last filter used, so one more time, come back under the Filter menu and choose Blur More. So this is what it's looking like now. Next, we're going to choose Emboss from the Stylize submenu. So Filter, Stylize, Emboss. Go ahead and set the angle to 135 degrees, the height to 3 pixels, and the amount to 100%. This will create a pretty rough texture, but in the next step, we'll smooth it out. This is what we're looking like now. If at any time you lose your selection that we're working with over here, you can always get it back by using the magic wand. There's so many different colors right now that it would be easier actually to select that which you don't want, the white and the black in this case, and invert your selection. So I click down one time here on the white, shift click the black, and I can see that I have actually some pixels in between those two colors that I need to kind of shift click in there until all of that goes away. So this has selected the black and the white, and you come up here to Select, Inverse, to invert your selection. Now once again, I have the area in which we're working selected. So here's where it gets tricky. We're going to use the Scale tool to stretch this selection all the way across this area here. actually even past this selection so that we can taper it on either side. So to do that, I want you to back out of your file, Command or Control minus, so that you can see a lot of the pasteboard, everything over here to the right. And next, you're going to choose the Move tool so that you can see the bounding boxes. If you're not seeing this, you can also come to Edit, Transform, Scale. We're going to grab this bounding box and stretch it to the right so that this space here takes up the entire white area. Ready? You're going to click down and drag it to the right. You can hold Shift, but it should be fine if you just grab to the right. You see how I've run out of room? It's okay. Command or Control minus to back out. Once again, stretch. Keep stretching. There. Now take a look as I zoom in with Command or Control plus, and you can see that my selection ends well past the end of my canvas. This looks really blurry, but go ahead and select your Move tool right up here once again to apply the transformation. Next, we're going to get rid of all of these colors to reduce the hues and make it more monochromatic. We'll do that using the hue saturation. So under Image, Adjustments, we're going to choose Hue Saturation or Command or Control U. So under the Hue Saturation dialog box, we're going to reduce our saturation, taking it down to -100. Look at our selection below. Because I have Preview selected, you can actually see what we've created. And I'll go ahead and deselect my selection with Command or Control D. Wow, this looks kind of like those original photos that were sent back from some lunar probes. So you could leave it like this, but if I zoom in with Command or Control plus, you can see that the edge, for whatever reason in my selection, looks a little bit uneven. So I'm going to take my pencil tool, located under the brush submenu, and fill it with black, making my point large enough with the right bracket. I'm going to click down and holding Shift, I'll just go across and clean that up very nicely. Head over to graphicsgirl.com and get your free Photoshop cheat sheet. It'll show you all the shortcuts in the program, whether you're on a PC or Mac. Just click the link below. Okay, next we're going to need to select this crater area down here again. So with all of these shades of gray, it's easier to select that which you don't want, which in this case would be the dark sky of space above it. So we're going to once again take our magic wand tool and select the black. Next, you'll come to Select, Inverse to invert that selection. Now you have everything below it selected. So when you're drawing, objects that are further away tend to recede and become more faint in hue as it goes to the background, and elements in the foreground are more vibrant, right? So we're going to add a gradient overlay to show that here, to give that illusion of depth. So to do that, with our selection now, go ahead and come to your fill colors here and hit X on your keyboard to make sure that white is to the foreground. If you don't have white and black showing here, you can always click the default foreground and background color. Next, you're going to choose your gradient tool. And then from the contextual menu at the top, you'll choose Lighten and change the opacity to 50%. Now we're ready to apply the gradient. Going to the top of your selection now, where it's further away, you're going to click down one time and drag, adding in your Shift key all the way to the bottom. Then let go. You can see that it applied a light white to see-through or transparent gradient that was about 50% in its opacity. Now go ahead and deselect with Command or Control D. Now this whole time, two things have happened. We never made any other layers. Showing our Layers panel by coming to Window, Layers, you can see all of this was done in a nice background that we could use later if we wanted. So let's go ahead and save this file, because we haven't already, and say Save or Save As. And in my Save As dialog box, I've created a folder called Lunarscape. And I can save this as a PSD or Photoshop file that will be layered. And I'll change the name of this and call it Lunarscape. .psd and give it a save. So this would be something that you could use over and over again. You can add elements like stars and galaxies or so. So just to give an example, we'll add a few more elements like hills here, and then you can see how you would use this backdrop with layers that you could turn on and off for future use. So we're going to go ahead and enhance this backdrop with some hills to give it some more interest. You'll come to Image, Duplicate. You can see here that you have a copy now of your lunar scape. Zoom in again with Command or Control plus. We'll create a little hill over here on the left and another little hill over here on the right. And to do that, we're going to use our Paths panel. To show your Paths panel, come to Window, Paths. And so it's from the hamburger menu in the upper right-hand corner that you could choose New Path. We'll call this Left Hill. So we're going to need to grab our pen tool from the toolbar, and we're going to create a little hill that comes down here and ends right at the surface. So we'll come to our left side there and come a little bit further and come a little over, and holding the Shift key will make it a straight line. And then we're just going to add a little bit of a slope as it comes around to the top. So I'll add 1 point up here. Rule of thumb when using the pen tool is always to try to use as few points as necessary. So if I want a little curvature here, and maybe right over here, and then straight down to end that selection. What you can see here in my Paths panel is that there is now a path of what you created saved right here. If you didn't select New Path from the hamburger menu, but you just began to use the pen tool, it would save it as a work path that you then would need to choose to save. So in this way, you've saved a step. So one of the advantages of using the Paths panel is that you can take any path and make it a selection from that same hamburger menu in the upper right-hand corner of the panel. With it saved, you can choose to make selection. In this way, you'll never lose your selections. We are not going to feather that radius, and we're just going to keep it with these settings that you see here. Just like before, you'll see marching ants that indicate it's a marquee that then can be filled. We're going to fill it in the same way that we filled our selection originally. It would probably look a little too flat to just add a gray tone to this hill selection. So we're going to add first some texture and then a gradient to give it some depth. We'll choose Add Noise from the Noise filter. Once again, it was Noise, Add Noise. We'll keep it Gaussian and maybe do about half or 200%. You can use the slider or type in the field. It's previewing it for you because you have the preview checked. So go ahead and choose OK. And we'll blur this out like we did originally by coming to Filter, Blur, Blur More. One more time, Blur More. And then it was the Emboss with Filter, Stylize Emboss. This adds that lumpy emboss texture to the selection. So our settings from last time are saved at 135 degrees, 3 pixels high, with an amount of 100%. Next, we'll take the saturation down in the same way that we had originally, which is Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation, or Command or Control U. Reducing that saturation all the way down and clicking OK. Next, we'll want to create some more depth by adding a gradient. So we'll take our eyedropper tool here and select a lighter color and then hit X on our keyboard to toggle our colors and choose a darker hue. So now we have a lighter to darker hue from our lunar scape instead of black and white. And we'll come up to our contextual menu at the top and make sure that the mode is lighten, opacity 50% still. We'll click at the bottom and drag up holding our Shift key. So it looks like it's a little bit lighter where it meets the ground and it fades up. So if I were to hide my selection now with Command or Control H, you can see that we might need to reposition our hills. So good thing we made our hill a path that you can choose to make a selection from. With it selected, You always have the ability to use your Move tool to position it into place or to make a copy. So before you move it, go ahead and hit Command or Control C to copy. Coming back now into our Layers panel, we'll paste that selection into its own layer that we can rename Left Hill. Okay, so now we can select that layer and with our Move tool, position it down, just with a down arrow. So when you hide the layer, you can see we might need to do some cleanup. I'll take my brush tool and just go back to my background layer here and clean this up. Just kind of take away the edge so that when I show my layer, it's clean. Zooming in so I can see what I'm doing. Hand tool to pan over, and when I'm in my brush tool, I can increase or decrease the size of my brush, either with right bracket to make it larger or left bracket to make it smaller. And with it smaller, I'll just get in there and take away some of the edge. Head over to graphicsgirl.com and get your free Photoshop cheat sheet. It'll show you all the shortcuts in the program, whether you're on a PC or Mac. Just click the link below. Now, don't worry about the space between. We'll blend these two together to make it look a little bit smoother. I could go ahead now and make another path for the right-hand side for a right hill, or I could just invert this hill that I have. So to do that, I could make a duplicate of this layer, drag it across. I'm holding the Shift key down to make it the same horizontal plane. And now I could choose Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal. So backing out a little bit here, I could move my hill a little bit off so they're not identical, but just a little bit further off. Plane, and there you go. That way I don't need to go through all of these steps again. The last step is I'm going to smooth out the transition between my hills and the lunarscape. I could keep all of these layers that I have, and if I did, I'd rename this one to be Right Hill. But what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to go ahead and flatten my entire image. If I ever need that hill, remember, I can always get that selection by coming back to my Paths panel. And now in my Layers panel, I have one layer called Background. I'm going to do this just so I can make one selection that runs all the way across and smooth or feather that out. So with my rectangular marquee tool, I'm going to choose a few pixels above and a few pixels below, all the way across my lunarscape here. I'll go ahead and blur the selection by coming to Filter, Blur, Blur More. A little bit subtlety now. Remember, whenever you're looking at your artwork on screen, be mindful of the percentage magnification that you're at. Here, I'm in 400%. So to see what the end user will see, I want to be at 100% magnification. And here, if I want to keep my selection, but just hide it temporarily, I can hit Command or Control H. So overall, this is what we're looking like. And I think it looks pretty cool. Now I'm at 200%. It still looks cool to me. So if you want to save this lunarscape as a copy, you can hit Command or Control S, and you could say lunarscape with hills. You still have your original one without the hills. These would be good for individual backdrops that you bring into something else, or if I wanted to combine them, I could select all. On my lunarscape PSD, the original one that had only one layer, I could select all with Command or Control A, then Command or Control C to copy and bring it into my lunarscape hills and paste. I could call this lunarscape, and I could unlock and rename this one to be called with hills. Bringing it to the top now, turn it on and turn it off. I would definitely paste the original lunarscape into the lunarscape hills if you wanted to, because that way you retain your selection or path of the hill. This can just be the start of what you're going to create. You know, if you wanted to make this look like Mars, you could make a duplicate of that with hills layer, double click it and call it Mars. And in this layer, change the hue saturation. This time we'll just go right for it, Command or Control U, and we could just hit colorize and bring that hue all the way to be the red planet. Or to make it even more different, we can select our sky area here with our magic wand tool, clicking down one time to select all of the black, and we can create a different type of gradient in this area. Go ahead now with your eyedropper tool, select one of the shades of red and white. So we have white in the foreground and then one of the mauve or reddish tones in the back. With our gradient tool, we'll select radial from our choices and make sure that it's normal with 100% opacity. And what you'll do now with your gradient tool is just to click in the lower kind of left-hand corner of where it meets that left hill and drag out. You know, if you hold in the shift, it's completely vertical or 45-degree angle. So let's make it 45-degree angle about halfway across the sky and let go. Woo! Voila! If you could come back to your hills layer, selecting that sky, but now coming back into the Mars layer. And maybe I will expand my selection just a bit by coming to Select, Modify, Expand. Maybe I'll make it something like 5 pixels. When I click OK, you can check out your selection. Might be a little bit much, but let's see how it does. And blur. So you can see here at 100%, this is the look that we're going for here. You can always play around with your gradient if you weren't 100% happy with it. Maybe these two tones a little bit closer. By going back to your hills area and using your magic wand, selecting that black area will make it a little bit easier to select all of this. And when you take your gradient tool here, what you'll do is, instead of, you know, when I hit X on my keyboard and I drop out, maybe I'll choose one of the lighter tones of red. So there's less disparity between the white and the mauve. So when I choose my gradient tool, putting the white back to the foreground, clicking down and dragging out, it's really subtle. So you can play around with it. I drop out a mid-tone value, bringing white back to the foreground, gradient tool, clicking down and dragging out. So wherever you put that starting point is where that light source will be. You start it over here and drag it out, and why it would look different. So, and the length of your gradient also will affect how much color is impacted. I kind of like it a little bit darker, so you want to go for that wow factor, make it the two colors further away from one another and the focal point a little bit further away. Command or Control D and voila, red planet. You know, if you wanted to take this overall image and change the hue of everything, why you could make this look like it was the bottom of the ocean. Because the same technique that you use to change the gray to red can also be used to change this whole thing to be like aquamarine. So I'll go ahead and make a duplicate here and I'll say ocean floor. So I'll get my selection once again from my with hills and come back up to my ocean floor. And I'll actually expand my selection with modify, expand. This time maybe like 3 pixels and click OK. I'll change that gradient to be linear with the light source being at the top and it getting darker the lower you get to the ocean floor. Maybe not even as dark as that, maybe about halfway down. Okay, so Command or Control D to deselect that. And now I can change the whole hue of this layer called ocean floor with Command or Control U. And this time when I colorize, I'll choose more of an aquamarine type color. So this is just how you can start with one idea in Photoshop, like a lunar landscape, add some texture, some color, some gradients to create anything that you want. If you found this video helpful, give it a like. share it with your friends, and please subscribe to my channel. And don't forget, for free marketing, branding, and design resources, head over to graphicsgirl.com. That's graphics with PH and S, girl with no I and 3 R's. And I'm here to help you design your brand.